and welcome to the show. I'm Nisha Poddar. Now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's 5-part financial package has been the biggest talking point in the country. While one is still trying to assess the impact that the pandemic is going to have on the overall economy, one is also trying to understand if the overall all-round relief and reform package which has been presented by the government is going to address most of these issues which are going to crop up. To throw more light on this, I have two gentlemen who are seasoned on economy, business as well as the investment aspects. You're welcoming Sanjay Nair of KKR as well as Koushik Chatterjee of Tata Steel. Gentlemen, so good to have you on CNBC TV-18. Now, Koushik, starting with you, you coming from the steel industry are at a vantage point. You have an overview of some of the sectors which are clearly economic indicators like construction, realty as well as automotive sector. How are you seeing the present condition in terms of the business as well as the demand, and how do you see the restarting process which is going to be our biggest challenge?
Thank you, Nisha. Good afternoon. So let me step back, and we should also understand the context within which, on which we are speaking at this point of time. We were in a lockdown from end March, and we continue to do so in a different degree at this point of time. I think the health and safety was the priority for the country and still continues to be. And therefore, we had, when I say we, the entire country had recalibrated itself to ensure that the health and safety aspect is focused, so is the employee health and so on. So which obviously meant that the economy had to come down to a stop effectively, other than essential services and the essential needs of everybody. And that resulted in a, obviously, the industrial activity came down very sharply, especially in some sectors, which is, say, for example, the customer sectors of the steel industry like automotive or construction and so on. And I think this is a very much an evolving situation. We got to see how the health environment moves in the next few weeks and few months, and obviously from that point of view the economy has slowed down, and there's no doubt about that, and it is an accepted slowdown because the priorities are different at this point of time. Having said that, the livelihood is also an important issue. So having reacted as one of the stringent countries in the beginning, we are now moving slowly to open up in a very measured way. A lot of thought has gone into the opening up strategy. We have had some issues and serious issues on the workers going back home, but we will have to take a holistic view. So in that light, I think this financial package, which has got both the stimulus aspect as well as reform aspect, trying to address some of these concerns which needs to be there, because India has a very strong fundamental economic story. So even if we say that this quarter is a difficult quarter, a challenging quarter, and everybody is hunkered down to preserve themselves, I'm sure that the economy will get back gradually to its normal levels.
All right, so that is an optimistic approach coming in from there, Koushik Chatterjee, always. But let's straight away address the elephant in the room here. Sanjay Nair, while a lot has been spoken about the 20 lakh crore rupees package which the government is saying, and most of the analysts have really touted it as only 1% of the GDP vis-a-vis 10% which the government has been talking about. Now, there is a big debate going on between the long-term structural reforms that have been spoken about by the government versus the stimulus package that was really required.
Yeah, look, I think, Nisha, I've always been consistent in this. I think within the constraints of the balance sheet of the government, I think this was a very good package. Again, extremely well researched and very well directed towards very specific areas and channels that require the money. I think the basic thesis here seems to be that they have tried to help out the MSME, the SME, the COVID impacted, the frontline people, the migrants, to live to see another day. I think that's critical. So this is a pretty targeted stimulus. This is not a massive consumption stimulus, and I frankly don't believe in a massive consumption stimulus, because what we saw after the GFC in '08, they always finally, peter off unless you build a supply side. So my view is that forgetting the numbers and a lot of debate about it, this is the right amount rather than go and print a massive amount of money, and very well directed. And I think the execution of how this gets to the MSMEs, how it gets to the discoms, how it gets to the COVID relief, and how it gets to the HFCs and NBFCs, different schemes have been detailed out in great detail. They've got to be implemented. So the way I see this is the tactical part is probably going to be immediate and effective. The structural part we should talk about a little later. I believe more in the structural reforms, and some have been announced and a lot more can be done, so that you have a much more robust supply side rather than keep depending upon a temporary stimulus.
All right, but a lot of people say that it's a demand-led issue that we are facing. Of course, the supply chain constraints is an added issue right now. But don't you also think that demand push was also required at this point, because we entered the COVID situation, especially with fractured balance sheets already, Sanjay?
Yeah, agreed. But you can promote demand. I believe that unless you get the basics right, the demand uptick will be absolutely temporary again, right? So as I said, there's enough in this for the people who need to get their livelihood back, to save some of the sectors that would otherwise collapse. There's a little bit for real estate here. There's a little bit for NBFCs. There is the creation of fund of funds. There are a lot of announcements such that, as I said, you can live through the crisis and come out on the other side. So my belief is that you can't create demand if the per capita GDP and the intrinsic growth is not there. So I think there's enough out there to see the stimulus for the next 3 to 4, 5, 6 months. But in the interim, I think there's a lot to be done to make sure that the consumption and the demand is much more sustainable. And I think a lot of that depends upon how you instigate the business, how do you get the private sector involved, and how do you get the supply side going. If you don't do that, frankly, Nisha, you can give as much money to the people as you want, and ultimately when it's finished, you're back to exactly where you started. That's my view. And I think, I'm not sure everybody agrees with it, but I think within the constraints that the government had, they have tried to balance their own balance sheet, their own income statement, and try to do the best they can. Look, we entered the crisis with a pretty weak balance sheet in the financial sector. A lot needs to be done for the financial sector, because you can't have an economy grow if you don't have a stronger financial sector. And I think we should really talk about that in due course.
All right, so very important specific points made by you, Sanjay, and I'll pick your brain on a lot of those as well. But your point taken, you're backing the slow and sustainable recovery that the government is probably backing at this point, and has taken steps more towards that rather than giving a booster shot to the economy. So probably that's the intent. But let me ask a corporate on these reforms then. So Koushik, when I think of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which the finance minister has spoken about, the prime minister has spoken about, one can't help but think, having known Tata Steel, that the very premise of your inception of the company was on the basis of self-dependence when it came to steel for India. What do you think about the reforms that have been spoken about, and which of those are specifically going to impact Tata Steel?
So before I answer that in more specific, Nisha, I think I just want to extend what Sanjay mentioned on the restarting the MSME sector, because that's actually the foundation for the large manufacturing and services part of the economy. And providing a 3 lakh crore liquidity to that sector actually is, it's like starting a generator to start generating power or whatever have you. because I think that liquidity is very important, because many of these MSMEs were starved of liquidity. They did not have the working capital to produce and supply, and therefore I think that has a larger ramification and a positive ramification to start the economy back and ensure that the supply side efficiency gets back on its wheels. So I think that is a very, very important part. So as I said, that this whole announcement over 5 days had an element of kickstarting the economy through liquidity. Yes, it was not grants and cash at the hands of people as such. Some of the Western countries have given, for example, employment grants to companies, 80%, 90%, and so on. That was not there. But certainly it had the liquidity available with fair bit of relaxation in terms of having access to that liquidity. Prior to that, RBI had stepped in with also liquidity measures, which is also welcome. So I think liquidity as such within the economy has been opened up, and whether it's MSMEs or companies, etc., are open to borrow and convert that borrowing into profits and cash flows, and then pay back that and continue forward in terms of growth. As far as the structural reforms are concerned, I will pick up two. One is the area of defense production, and I think there is a huge opportunity there, given India's defense bill, to really become big and really scale up the industry in India, and that will have multiplier effect across several ancillary and the entire ecosystem. And the second one is the mining industry, where the exploration to production licensing would ensure that this sector can open up very significantly, and will be again a multiplier effect on employment and the economy in general. And that is again a very large outlay that can come in. The fourth part is that as we see, the agricultural infrastructure fund could also play a very important lever in ensuring that the agricultural efficiency comes in. And to build a fund, there would be construction, there would be other areas. We don't know all the details of all the announcements, but I think these are things which will make India a more efficient economy. So that's a 3-5 year horizon on the structural side. Maybe if the execution efficiency is good, then we may be shortening that period. But those were necessary, and I think reforms are always a journey, and therefore that's the right path in the journey. The short term is being looked at from a liquidity point of view, from a point of ease of doing the business. There are risks in the sense, as Sanjay mentioned, execution risk. A lot of the liquidity is through the banking system, and the banking system, I hope that would step up to make that available and ensure that the last mile delivery is efficient on that. That's one of the most important things. And I think we haven't yet understood as a country what is the implication of the people or the workers who have gone back home, and how would they come back, and what is the pace at which they will come back, and what is the comfort that within which they will come back. Because unless the health environment, which is the primacy of everything, improves, and we have a situation where we have the pandemic control, we will have a risk on that part. So this is what I take out of the entire.
All right. So labor concern actually is a big concern. In fact, I will come back on that particular aspect again with you, Koushik. At this moment, let's slip into a short breather. Sanjay as well as Koushik will throw more light on the impact of the financial package which has been announced by the government on business. Stay tuned to Big Deal.
क्या आपको इंडिपेंडेंट